Good afternoon, everybody. This session is entitled Global Skills and Leadership Education, Perspectives from Asian Business Schools. Let me introduce the panelists. Professor Ravi Kumar, Shaw Chair Professor and Dean, Nanyang Business School, Nanyang Technical University. Mr. Tomoya Nakamura, Dean, Graduate School of Management here at Globus University. Professor Helmut Schutte, Vice President and Dean, China Europe International Business School, or CEIBS. And the session is moderated by Professor Yoko Ishikura, who is Professor Emeritus at Hitotsubashi University. Professor Ishikura, please.
Thank you very much. Welcome to the session entitled Global Skills and Leadership Education. I think global leadership and global leadership, which combines the two, has been a very popular topic in the past decade or so. And I think we are all faced with a global competition, and we wonder whether we need good leaders with a different sets of skills and in the face of the global competition, and how is it different in Asia from the rest of the world? Because we tend to focus on business. Whenever we talk about business education, leaderships, and so forth, we tend to focus on US and Europe. But I assume that there are something different in the Asian business schools, and that's what we would like to explore. And at the same time, the Asian region, as a region, is where the growth is. So the human capital overall is the engine of growth. So the companies are very much into the expanding their business operations in Asia, and they need increasing number of people who can operate in a very different setup and context. So that's what we would like to focus on today. And what I would like to do is I will ask each one of the panelists to give their sort of view and the position of their school, demand supply of the business education and business schools and what they are doing currently. And then we will get into the discussion rather free. I just found out that what I was thinking in advance was a little bit different from what the panelists had in mind. I was just much further. Probably I was talking about beyond 2020. So I just realized that I'm a little bit off. So I'm back to 2014, trying to look at 2020. So that's where I am. But we may go on to the future, because education basically is talking about the future. So we're not talking about current managers, we're talking about the future leaders. So that will require a little bit different skill sets, I think. So if we have time, we'll get into that. But let me start off with Ravi, representing what you have been involved in business school education and the administration in different countries, and now you're in Singapore, which is very well known for good human capital policies as well as good business education. So if you could start off with your assessment of where we are.
Let me start off with my own journey. Grew up in India, was educated in engineering, not very global, although we read a lot of newspapers at that time. Went to the US, spent 38 years of my life there, did my PhD in engineering, no business background, but I did go to teach in a business school after that. After 38 years, I did spend 3 years, 2008 through 2011 in Korea. I was dean of the Korea Advanced Institute of Science and Technology, KAIST Business School there for a couple of years. And now, having given up my full-time job in the US, I was in University of Southern California for 28 years as a vice dean and administrator there. Now I'm in Singapore, leading Nanyang Business School. Globalization the job is still not done at all by any means. I started, many of my globalization came when I was at the University of Southern California, when I decided that I had to educate my American students about what Asia was getting to be done or Europe was doing. The first class I took abroad had 60% of my students without any passports, and they had to get their passports. It was so insular at that time. It's changed a lot since then. And my own education of globalization came from actually visiting companies all around the world and how the world was changing so dramatically, so fast. And I really felt that my students had to see it, feel it, touch it, experience it, smell it. Otherwise, they don't going to get it. Now, sitting there in Los Angeles is a very cushy life. And even now, and having been in Korea for 3 years, I know how culture plays a big role in everything that we do, in our behavior, in our decision making. Even Singapore is really a city-state with 3 cultures in there, Malays and Chinese and Indians. When they go home, they all go back to their cultures. And they're very comfortable sitting in Singapore and not going out. So by no means is this notion of globalization complete. So we are embarking on what we call our globalization, is being termed the business of culture and the culture of business. That's how we are terming it. And we want to make this come alive to our students and student population as we go forward.
Thank you very much. Tomoya-san.
Thank you, Rabi. I'll try to follow your structure. I will start from my personal story, and then I'll talk about our business school education in general. I'm a Japanese, but I was grown up in the United States, and I came back at high school, so I had to learn Japanese as well as Japanese culture. I started working in a trading firm. I went for my MBA, and after my MBA, I was running a company on Justak, a very traditional Japanese company. And then I came to Globus. So my background is a little bit more from the industry. And at Globus, what we think about globalization is that maybe there's 2 elements, big elements. One thing is mindset. Especially Japanese students are humble in a way, or maybe according to Japanese culture, we don't explicitly, make a point. So that's the first thing that we have to overcome in going global. The second thing we need to change is we have to tell a personal story. And in Japan, you don't necessarily need to speak about yourself. But if you go global, as Rabi-san started us off, you need to be able to speak about yourself in a personal story. And at Globus, we ask students to come up with their personal mission. A personal mission is a personal goal. Not to become president, not necessarily to buy a Ferrari, but to, let's say, become a bridge between Malaysia and Japan, improve the women's status in the workplace. So these are some of the things that we have asked students, whether they are from Japan or they are from international. And as a consequence, by getting the right mindset and having a personal story, we believe that our students can go global. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Helmut, please.
Helmut Schütte, coming from Shanghai, where I'm the Dean of CIBS, the China Europe International Business School. China is for me the 10th country in which I live and work. So I'm on the globalization side, most probably a bit of an extreme. I have also lived in Japan as a professor of Tokyo University. I was at Harvard and in many other places. CIBS is a very large business school, no undergraduates, but and with an average age of 40 years. So MBAs, EMBAs, executives. 4 campuses, 3 in China and 1 in Africa. 140 professors, so in every respect very large. Very determined to compete with the best schools in the world. We are the young kid on the block. We are only 20 years old, but we are the Financial Times among the top 20 in the world in the various categories. Very performance-oriented in every respect for students as well as for faculty. Perhaps that's all what I should say.
Thank you very much. What I gathered so far is that Singapore, you mentioned culture of business, business of culture, as sort of one aspect of globalization. Globus, its mindset and personal history. The need for personal history, and China, it's large, and there are many students everywhere, and every campus kind of things. What are the skills? It seems like I thought that the business school, curriculum-wise, is much more like finance, strategy, operations, a little bit of technology and so forth. But what I hear from you is quite different, where your focus is. And does it reflect the Asian status, or is it something that you think is uniquely global?
From our perspective, we have been given a center, for example, called Asian Consumer Insight by the government. It's a $30 million center. And we work with multinationals like Unilever or DBS, Coca-Cola, etc. And the kind of research we do for them, Asahi, for example, here in Japan, the kind of research that we do is across Asia, the consumers are very different. Their mindsets are different. They make different decisions. Their perspective of a project, for example, on the beauty, the notion of beauty across Asia is very different. And so we do research in this area for companies and help them in some sense understanding the culture that drives the kind of consumption patterns we're going to see as these countries become larger, more successful, as the per capita incomes grow. What are they going to consume? What are they going to look at? How are they going to make decisions as such? And so it's risk management, risk taking in the insurance companies. So we're looking at that, and that's the application layer, as I call it. At the research layer, we have a cultural sciences lab. I have a neuroscientist in my marketing area. I have two psychologists, one who works with geneticists in the university on looking at how maybe culture is part of the genes, nurture versus nature. We're doing experiments in this area. The brain scientist looks at brain patterns and how the decisions are no longer on the basis of surveys, but rather how your brain actually makes decisions. And we're actually looking at fMRI data and looking at that, and is culture part of that? Now, how Japanese make decisions, and we have gaming that we do. We have sensory equipment that we look at to look at really the science of culture in some sense. Just like we have an economic science, we need, I think, a science of culture. And so we are embarking on that. At the same time, we also have a cultural leadership lab where one of our faculty members has developed a notion of cultural intelligence. Just like IQ and EQ, we can measure CQ. She's published books in this area. So we're going to try to put into effort for my students as they come in, we'll evaluate them. As they go out, we'll evaluate them. And in between, they better have been educated, experiences, global, everything to make them more culturally savvy and intelligent. So we are doing that at the same time. Last but not least, we have a Asian Business Case Center. So all the applications that we do is now converted into case material that we can take into our classroom as pedagogy. So this is what we are trying to say is how to do this effectively as such. And so we have some assets already in place. I didn't create them. They're already there. And as I said, I've been there only 1 year now in Singapore. So trying to put it all together into a coherent strategy of nurturing global leaders for a sustainable world is very important to us. So that's what we're trying to enunciate. That's what I'm trying to get my faculty together and get my students to now implement these things on our students. So it's an exciting journey that we are on, I think, at this point in time.
I think maybe my story is very close to Ravi-san, but I think there's a universal part and a very regional part. The universal part, like strategy, marketing, finance, accounting, no matter whether you study in the United States, Europe, Asia, everyone needs to understand the functional skills. The regional part at Globus, because we have a very big corporate training arm, we have brought in our experience with leading Japanese automobile manufacturers, chemical companies, retailers. And that knowledge we kind of put together into a course called Globalization of Japanese and Asian Companies. We have a course called Japanese Management. And we have some, classic readings, like, Yomeigaku, this is Chinese philosophy. So there's the regional part. And for those who want to have an Asian career, the business infrastructure is very different from United States or UK. For example, in Japan, we have lots of zaibatsu, which is a very big conglomerate like Mitsubishi, or there's a zaibatsu in India, like Tata, or Samsung in Korea. So the basic, the channel, the distributors, the customer, preference, these things are different. So on a universal, skill base, I think students have to understand the regional differences. And by combining the two, we think we can equip students to have a successful career in Asia.
I would like to put a historical perspective on this. I mean, if we go back 10, 20 years, the best students of Asia went to the United States or UK to study. That includes my neighbor here, right? And the rest stayed here and studied here. Let's be very brutal in accepting that. Now this has come somehow to an end. There are less Japanese students going abroad than in the past. In China, it's fading away. In India, it's still growing very fast. But there's something else that Asian universities and business schools have themselves developed quite extraordinarily well. They can now match, in many respects, American universities, and not all, but many of them may be more appropriate for people who want to stay in the region. But then, for the schools, there are lots of challenges. It's the curriculum, which you have mentioned, but it's also the questions of the professors themselves. It's the issue of student mix. It's the issue of locations. And many things one can do in bringing in sort of programs such as certain modules run outside the country, as we do, send some students to Globus here from time to time, or exchange programs, etc. So there is a lot in the pipeline. My school is China-Europe International Business School, so this international dimension is, of course, very important for us. But it's very difficult, I'm as a dean there, to hold up the flag which says we are international, because we are overtaken by Chineseness. Now, what do I mean with that? We have a huge demand for management education in China. We could double any of our programs tomorrow morning with Chinese students. Most of the business in China is still Chinese run. The Chinese market is now in a downturn, but read it carefully, it's now not anymore 7.5 but 7.3%. Why should I, as a Chinese businessman, bother about the world outside, which is fundamentally mature and difficult? I would rather earn my living in China, where everybody knows me and I am very comfortable. So there is still a huge challenge to keep up this international movement. My strongest argument is that if we look at leadership, that no manager, whether he is in Singapore or Japan or China, will be a true business leader who does not have an understanding of the international world. Even China, as a latecomer, has joined the global economy. Many Chinese companies now go abroad. This year, China will invest more money outside than foreigners invest in China, right? And even if you are in one of the faraway provinces, to know what the international benchmarks are is absolutely essential for success. But it is obviously much more difficult. We talk about the language, we talk about the discomfort to deal with foreigners. We all know that. I know this, I've lived in so many countries. It's not comfortable. You're always an outsider. So I think as educators, we have nevertheless the absolute obligation to push our students, whether they're young MBAs or older executives, towards a more international outlook. This, stop there, this comparative perspective, right? I will challenge any of you here in the room how often you've heard or used yourself the term China is unique. And I would challenge you and ask the question, are you really sure? Or are you just ignorant? Sorry to be so impolite, right? So most people who argue that something is unique just don't know, right? There's a difference between unique and being different. Nobody is arguing. But that we 3 or 4 here are different from each other, it's very clear. That China is the largest population in the world, that's pretty clear. We don't have to talk about it. That doesn't make China unique, right? The one-child per family policy is something unique. But there are not many other things which are unique. We have a lot to learn from other countries. Obviously, Japan less from China, but more from other mature economies, etc. And for China, there's much to learn from Korea, let's face it, or Indonesia or South Africa, I would argue.
Thank you very much. It seems like that there is a universal sort of foundation which can be taught at any business schools regardless of the location. And at the same time, we have regional components on top of it. And my question, and I think you mentioned that, regional, even in Asia, I think there are differences. And Asia is very well known for differences by countries and so forth. So how do you deal with that? But at the same time, how do you deal with this sort of business of managing business school in the country like China, where most of the people are just interested in my short-term career, which is much more focused on China, whereas over the long run, you really need to have a global mindset. So how do you, make sure that you try to meet both? And one way, at least I can think of, is that the collaboration among business schools. And has there been any attempt along those lines? Like, for example, among the 3 business schools, or is it still too busy sort of trying to meet the demand in your country?
We have a double degree program with Waseda for a long time now, double degree here. We work with Shanghai Jiao Tong University with a variety of programs. Jiaoda is very close, it's for more than 10 years we have programs there. And Nanyang means South China, and so we teach some programs in Chinese. We have an executive MBA program in English, and we have an executive MBA program in Chinese. Also, we have a master's in finance, which is dual language, bilingual. We teach it in English and in Chinese for the same audience. When they come to Singapore, they taught in English. In Shanghai, they taught in Chinese. So bilingualism, is extremely important. We think, at least. And so we have reached out to other countries also. We have a relationship with Europe and the US and Berkeley, or all these schools. We do take our students there to globalize them, at least see aspects of the US, for example. And the US has having lived there for so long, the US has a very clear culture. It is individualism, even to the extent of owning guns. I can't trust government to protect me. It is profit maximization, which is shareholder value, very important in the corporate decision making. And finally, it's markets. That's the only thing which is efficient. And that's the mantra, that's the culture, and that's what drives the US culture, US education there. We may teach about, yes, Japan is different, yes, Korea is different. But when they all grow up, they want to become like us. The attitude is there, a little bit of arrogance is there. It was, again, before the financial crisis, of course. But after the crisis, I'm not sure it's changed much, really. So each of these things have cultures. And so how do you now get across to our students that when you want to work in a JP Morgan or Morgan Stanley, or you want to work for a Nomura or a UOB, these are very different companies. There are government-linked companies. And so how do you become successful? So very important. And we take them across to other parts of the world also to do this. The recent thing we started is a Africa Study Center, because my Singaporean companies think Africa is the next major market for them. So I have tomorrow 40 executives from Kenya and Tanzania will be in our classrooms who want to learn about how to do business in China. And Singapore is the best of the East and the West. We understand the East and we hopefully understand the West. And we have a mixed culture there. And so we educate them on how to do business in Asia. And at the same time, my executives there, EMBAs, get to talk to them, network with them, so they understand how the business is done in Africa. So this is all part and parcel of this globalization we try to bring across. It's not just the education in classroom, it's also the networking events. It's also to take them out of their comfort zone as such. And we are largely undergraduate population, unlike my two partners here. We have a very large undergraduate population and a much smaller graduate population as such. But nevertheless, this is what we try to do for all of them.
I see. Because you mentioned this sort of the companies, multinational companies and Asian-based companies, what are their current hiring sort of policies of the people? I mean, the human capital is such a, yes.
Yeah. I said we have 140 faculty members, with one exception. This is the very senior professor, who's 85 years old. Everybody else has gotten a PhD outside China. We have not recruited one single professor in China. If there's one area in which we compete with the leading business schools is in hiring professors. In fact, we pinch them from our competitors. Anybody who reads our list of faculty members will find quite a few faculty members who have beforehand taught in very prestigious Western business schools. Whether they are Chinese or non-Chinese doesn't matter. I think an international faculty is absolutely essential if you actually claim to be international. I would love to find a suitable Japanese professor, but they feel so comfortable here in Japan that they don't want to come, right? But I would love to do that. That's absolutely essential. Like these partnerships or alliances, right? Many business schools have that now, double degree programs, exchange programs, etc. We have them with many business schools. We go one step further. It's very clear that within the next period, we will also have a business school in Europe. We don't see us here being stuck in Asia. If you want to have an international outlook, you have also to be outside Asia.
Does it reflect the need of the companies to have all those operations?
Look, this is pushing the topic a little bit. I personally see business schools like professional service providers. That's very controversial, especially for academics here on the sort of, most academics don't want to.
I came from
listen to
management
that,
consulting,
right?
so I understand.
And if we look at the McKinseys, or if we look at the law firms of this world, or the advertising agencies, whatever you want, they are all over the world now, and they serve both local and global needs. I don't see any reason why business schools shouldn't go the same way.
I must say, Helmut has an advantage. He comes from INSEAD before, and you know how global they are, with campuses everywhere. But at the same time, from my experience, starting a new campus anywhere in the world with faculty management, that's the most important thing. And if you don't know how to manage faculty in other parts of the world, the quality of faculty, the tenurability, and your brand is associated with that. And if you can't manage that process, you can kill yourself. And most universities are scared to do that. That's the one part. The second part is there are already good schools around everywhere else. So why do I need to put brick and mortar elsewhere? Why can't I just partner with somebody else? So that's another philosophy. That's my own philosophy as such. Not to grow brick and mortar, but rather connect with the right kinds of partners or the right aspirations that we have to become better and to become more global as such. So that's what we look for, good partners.
For the partnership, CU students are coming to Globus this December. This is an elective course, New and Old Japan. And maybe next year, our students will be going to CEIBS to understand, Chinese business. So for the school side, we're starting to build a network. But I think all this, the attendees with the green tag, they are global students. For the international MBA program, 90% of our students come from overseas. So for them, we take them to Tohoku to look at the aftermath of the earthquake and tsunami. And also we have partnership with corporations, Japanese corporation, multinational corporation. And we ask students to do a consulting project for these companies. And as a consequence, our partnership is academia, business, also very regional. And in this way, I think students are very well equipped to build their careers.
Okay. Following the Helmut's reasoning of business school as a provider of the business services, professional business services, do companies, it doesn't have to be in Asia, still see the value of MBA?
Yes.
What else to expect, right?
No. I think what we have,
Give me more.
and you're referring to the situation in the United States, where there's an oversupply of very often mediocre quality and huge salary expectations. There is a crisis. I don't see any kind of crisis of this nature in Asia.
I was in Korea, and there our MBA students were the best that we could find. But slotting them into a company, into a Korean company, they have the Hobong system of personnel management. And you get 2 years of extra experience, and that's it. You don't get this jump in the salaries that gets you in the Financial Times rankings. So you're not going to find too many Korean universities who are going to be up there in the ranking because of the increase in salary as such. So the valuation on an MBA in different countries can be very different as such. And that's one thing I found out in Korea, that it's valued, but because they do it according to tenure and how long you've been there, and that's still the performance management system there. It's not purely the Western way of performance management. So that's what it is. So you're not going to get a large pool of funding for this kind of education there. But in Singapore, we have a very small program. Our MBA program is only about 100 students or so. So it's easy for us to place regionally. And we don't look at just Singapore, we look at it regionally as such. My biggest program is undergraduate. We take in 1,250 students every year. And the Singaporean mothers trust our degree as such. And we get some of the best students as such. And 98.4% get placed even before they finish the degree at our program. So again, the market is there for our students, the undergraduate business area as well as the graduate.
What about in Japan?
In Japan, maybe a little bit a mix between how it is in China and Korea. For the Japanese companies, you don't necessarily get a big, a paycheck. A lot of companies is based on seniority, so it takes a little bit more time. But if you go to a multinational company or a joint venture between a foreign firm and a Japanese firm, there's definite demand, and maybe the paycheck is bigger in foreign companies or multinational companies. And MBA is viewed, especially in Japan, because we are grown as generalists. You don't have a specialization early on in the career. So if you go for an MBA, a lot of CEOs, COOs said it's worth of 10 years of experience. In Japan, you get to become management. Typical Japanese companies around 40. But if you go for an MBA, probably you'll be equipped to run a company maybe in the early 30s. So I think that's a big difference that MBA brings.
Can I just come back to what you stated, that your own MBA students, right, participants, have 90% of the people coming from the outside. I think this is great. That should be the ambition of business schools in Asia, right? Perhaps not 90%, perhaps 50-50, those from the country and 50 from the outside. The time is over that everybody has to troop to Harvard. First of all, they cannot take everybody. And secondly, what's taught there may not be relevant. I think one has to be very clearly, and I have been a Harvard professor before, right? So, of course, that requires a lot of hard work also from the business schools. Excellence in teaching and new material and a view which is truly interesting on the world and not, limited to how to do business in Japan or how to do business in China. That's not enough. That's what has been done beforehand. But I think we should hope that in the next years or yet in 10 years from now, among the top business schools in the world, there should be at least 5 or so from Asia. I see no reason why this cannot happen.
I totally agree with Helmut. That's the reason why I came back to Singapore to lead a business school. After having been there for 38 years, I think we can do whatever they do, and even better. And the opportunities are here. The growth is here, and the diversity is here. I think, and we have great students out here too. So it's just putting together the system in place, the positioning in place, and how you're going to get our students the kind of jobs that they desire, the kind of experiences, the careers that they want. I think that it can be easily done. So that's my excitement of being here in Singapore. I totally gave up my job. I'm an emeritus there, and now I've started a whole new career in Singapore, leading business now in business school. That's very exciting for me.
So probably what I can see in 5 years out is that Asian business schools, I wouldn't name names, but sort of attracting a lot of people from outside of Asia, being educated and trained in Asia with the global perspective and so forth. My question then is that, well, we have to do all sorts of public relations and make sure our positioning is clear and so forth. But what about this issue of business schools or sort of universities in general offering what's needed in the future rather than what's needed today? By that I mean most of the frameworks are a little bit outdated. We don't have an industry, so how can I apply industry structure analysis when there isn't any industry to speak of? And technology playing such an important role, and it's much more like, if you make the business plan, but business plan today, to me, is something evolving. So you really do have to do a lot of prototyping, try to talk to the customers to find out their reactions, and with 3D printing and so forth, we can experiment a lot of things, which we were not able to do. So how do you make sure that what we offer will meet the needs of tomorrow's futures, future leaders rather than today? Right now, we have this incredible unemployment rate, and I'm just generalizing. I'm not talking about the leaders per se. But we have incredible amount of jobs which remain unfilled because they can't find the people with good skills. So there is a mismatch between the skills needed and what they learn at business schools. And I think business schools is not the only one place that's missing, but I think they do play a certain role. So how do you make sure that your sort of future ideal state of having 50% people from outside, make sure that they are there in 5 years? If we do this G1 Global in 5 years, what do we expect?
We have a advantage. Nanyang Business School is part of Nanyang Technological University. We are now ranked in the top 50 in the world, in the 40s I think now. And you talked about 3D manufacturing. We just we have the patents on wearable technology. 3D manufacturing, $30 million center given to us by the government now. So we have some amazing technologies that are there in the engineering faculty and in the science faculty as such. So I've started double majors with engineering, with my undergraduate at the graduate level. So it's very important to us that our faculty start working on research on how 3D manufacturing is going to disrupt supply chains, for example, and what is going to happen in the future. And we've told the engineering people the faculty, etc. Yeah, you develop technologies, but it has to be embedded in society, in with people and cultures, and and consumers. And so you must come to us and work with us, otherwise it's not going to work. All the technologies they develop is going to be useless. So they're listening to us now, and there's traction now that's starting to happen. That's the first thing. So we are embedded in an organization which breeds technology. And so that's wonderful for us. We can take advantage of that. The second aspect is of something you pointed out is, why are you looking for a job? Create a job. So one of the things about NTU is that in their mission statement is this notion of entrepreneurship. You know? So we are now, our undergraduates are coming up actually getting seed grants from the government to start up companies. I had a second-year student come to me and said, I need to take a couple of years off. And I said, why? He said, I just got $250,000 for a startup. And if I don't go be the CEO, the government won't give me the money. So I said, go. You know, or my EMBA student has just started a company. It's going to be listed. It's already listed. CordLife. So there are lots of aspects of entrepreneurship. It's very important to us in NTU and Nanyang Business School. So we have made entrepreneurship education a requirement for all our students coming in, undergraduate, a required 1-unit course, and a required 1-unit course on sustainability. Both technological, world, planet-wise, as well as sustainable organizations. So it's a requirement for all students coming in. So we started trying to get them as early as we can and sensitize them to this and saying, go be the leaders that we want you to be in the future.
How to say, we haven't really praised Harvard, so let me talk a little bit about Harvard, good things. Harvard started a course called Field, and that's not a classroom education. That is to go to Brazil, to Russia, to Germany, and to learn about the country. So one way of finding new business model is actually going, not case studies, not in the classroom, but actually visiting the site, seeing the reality, and maybe come up with new solutions. That's one thing. Another thing is, I think, a venture business, creation. For example, at Globus, we have a venture business context, and the top prize, the university will inject $50,000 US for the first prize. So if you have a very successful business plan, Globus will back up your business. So in that way, we are thinking maybe 3 or 4 venture business every year, and as a consequence, I think that would create new model or new strategy, new market segments, and so on.
Helmut?
I think the question raises several aspects. Number one, what do business schools do has to be relevant. And relevant has then various aspects as well. Is it up to date, or is it in line with the opportunities which we can offer technologically, for example? Let me give you an example. There is fundamentally no professor on the whole market in the world who can really teach digital marketing from the point of view of research, because basically research is so slow that what we see today in the market nobody has researched, which of course then raises questions about the quality and the timeliness of research which we are doing. The second issue is what we want to give to the participants really something which brings them to become leaders. And here my own feeling is, this is a very personal judgment, that business schools have become too much technocratic in the sense of pushing the hard side of the curriculum, finance, marketing, finance, accounting, economics, very much. Data analytics is one of these hot issues now, right? I wonder whether this leads people towards leadership, or whether there is not a need to strengthen the more soft issues much more. I think there is a weakness in business schools, and that brings up, of course, then also the cultural issue. There is no business school in the world which does not discuss almost on a daily base whether we teach the right thing, right, the curriculum. One way to come to grips with this is to have a very strict evaluation system and not to give tenure to any professor. To me, the moment a professor gets tenure, it's basically pre-retirement. And from the point of view of any participant who pays a lot of money, that is ridiculous. So I'm one of those who are strictly against retirement. This is basically government official lifetime employment, and who bothers what I'm doing? That is not acceptable in business schools.
Okay. Well, I think we have focused pretty much on global leaders and leadership education. My question is that now that we have a lot of technology such as online learning available to a lot of people, is it a role of business school? And I think Tomoya-san talked about this Tohoku school in Tohoku, which is much more interested in the community capacity building, so to speak. Is there a role of business school where you can make the education or intelligent knowledge assets of schools available and accessible to many more people than you do? And I'm specifically thinking about online learning because I tried it and I think it's very effective, though there are quite a few things which I need to worry about. But that's sort of related back to this women, and I'm not talking about diversity per se, but a lot of women may not be able to go to business school to learn. But we're talking about this women leadership, in the morning, and that's such a big issue in here. And if they can have an access to business education online, for example, they'll be able to learn new skills, and they may be able to learn, work part-time or whatever in much higher salary. I mean, that requires the different design of work at companies, but that will definitely offer some possibilities to much larger customer base. Any word on online education or sort of access to larger
Very
number of
clearly,
people?
this is the disruptive innovation which is coming our way. But when I say our way, it's not business schools, but it's basically the whole educational sector, where I would think that lecturing, the preferred mode of transfer of technology in Asia, is becoming obsolete. Listening in class to a teacher who, in the worst case, reads his paper is about the worst thing one can do to human beings. And then even being asked to pay money for that. That's outrageous. Online learning is already now interactive, available. Online learning, as you said, offers great opportunities reaching many more people. People in outlying regions or people who are busy, such as raising a family. I personally think that educational institutions, and that includes business schools, which are more agile, because they're more exposed to competition than state-owned universities, is an area which is too difficult. We see across the world already the big media groups or companies like Alibaba going into this large scale. And I really mean large scale. When you look at even a large business school like ours, we are tiny. So for us, the challenge is that we go into online learning. So you don't have to be there all the time. Everything which can be brought across in terms of lecturing, we can also have here. And then the role of a professor is transformed into a moderator and getting good discussions going. So the role will be different and most probably more difficult. Those professors, that's what I say in front of my own faculty, those professors who are only 40 now, 45 years old, and are in class and lecture only, will not retire as professors. they will lose their job beforehand. I'm deeply convinced of that. We have already 400 programs of this nature. We're not happy with what we have achieved. We have to put much more efforts into this. But then sort of things like accounting, finance, etc. These are things you can do, learn back at home. Your child is or your children are in bed, right? Your husband is cuddled or is still out and has a drink. So you can concentrate on that, right? Very good use of your time, and you don't have to travel. And universities don't have to have these expensive rooms. So you could reduce the fees. I mean, there is a lot in the pipeline which will come into the world of business schools or universities in general.
At Globus, we will start an online MBA from 2015, and I have actually taught a class online. Probably for those who do not live in Tokyo, it's more convenient. They can access from Sendai, from Fukuoka, from maybe Singapore. How to create the atmosphere, or the intensity, that's a challenge. And I agree to Helmut that for the faculty, it's much more difficult. But so for the basic learning, I think online would be very successful. But for apply, maybe face-to-face might have an edge. So I think it's a choice for the student. If time is more, valuable for you, maybe online is a choice. If you have the luxury to come to a campus, maybe coming to a campus for the stimulus learning, it might be better. That's my opinion. Yeah.
We have experimented with MOOCs. So we have 4 or 5 courses with Coursera. Even the business school has a course on Coursera. But that's not what we're going to do. That's just for show that we also can do it, and that's about it. We have committed ourselves to the blended learning, technology-enabled learning as such. And in our tagline, it said, nurturing global leaders for a sustainable world. And the word nurturing has a very, very intense meaning to me. First is self-learning. Everybody has to be able to do self-learning on their own after they graduate. So our faculty act as facilitators. They get material from their own material, PowerPoints or lectures from somebody else, TED Talks or YouTube, or I don't care. They facilitate the self-learning. And when students come, they get assessed. And how well did you learn on your own? The next part of it, I think, is peer learning. When you go into companies, you've got to learn from each other and work with each other. So we put them in teams of 6 or 8, and they learn with each other. And even the best student can become better by answering other people's questions. So that's what we call peer learning, and we assess them again on the same material. So the faculty is not there at all, except in the facilitation of the materials as such. Then comes the faculty. So now I've doubled the productivity of my faculty. Only half the time they're needed in class. And then they come with a live case. It could be a Harvard case, it could be their own case, it could be executive. And then the students are asked to do the analysis, the diagnosis, how much information is there, how much information is not there, the messy world of real life. And then they have to be creative, come up with some assumptions and defendable assumptions, and then present. And this is where the reality comes in. So it's very important to us. And this is where we are challenged, the faculty is there to challenge them and push them and defending what they are, make them confident of making those assumptions in the messy world. That's what we have to do at some point in time. And that's the classroom environment. And then we connect them to our alumni, we connect them to industry, and that's and build a network for them. Because in the future, it's not the student, it's not the money that I get from them, it's the alumni. My alumni is going forward. That's what's my most important, valuable asset, in my opinion, as such. So how do I create rabid fans of Nanyang Business School as we move forward as such? And that's the way we are thinking about this whole thing of education and technology as such. It's technology-enabled education.
Okay, great. Let me open up to the floor, and I would like you to ask questions. And please identify yourself first and ask a question, and specify who the question is for, if you could.
Thank you. I'm Seiji Kondo, former diplomat and also former commissioner for culture affairs, Bunkacho Chokan. I have a question to Helmut, and also I have a question to Ravi. My question to Helmut is that you said that if we think that China has a special, a unique practice to do business, it is based on ignorance. But when we look back upon 1960s and 70s, there was a big trade between Japan and the U.S. And the American business people criticized us that doing business in Japan is quite unique and very difficult. Then what happened afterwards was that American business people learned more and more about Japanese way of doing business, and also Japanese business people too also decided to change their practice so that their way of doing business is more transparent. So we need to have both sides' effort to narrow the gap. What do you think about the Chinese doing business in China? And also, my question to Ravi, is that in order for Asian business schools to get into top 10 international business schools, what kind of contribution would you be able to make, bringing in Asian culture or Asian flavor? Or do you think it is necessary to get rid of those Asian flavors in order to get into top 10 international business schools? So, Helmut.
I'm not sure whether I understood you well, and I hope I have not said that China is unique. China is different.
No, you said vice versa. You said it is not unique.
It is not unique. Yes, it is not unique. It is different, but it is a developing country which, in a sense, at the end of the 70s, all of a sudden discovered free enterprises and the market, right? And other countries have done that beforehand, so therefore it's not different. Of course, the size is different, the language, and then there are something which I would call rather superficial issues that are different and can be learned. Yeah. And the same way the United States is different, or even France is different from Germany and vice versa. So that has to be learned. So it has to be a balance. But to me, I'm also a professor of international management, so it's in my DNA, right? The issue is always to see what can be learned from other countries, what are the parallels, and then to see what is really different. That is what we should, as business schools, transfer this insight to students who want to be leaders in future. Absolutely, absolutely. And you see, that's now my observation from what I see in China, although China is now open for more than 30 years. You still have people who come into China as foreign businessmen and assume that what works in Cincinnati, Ohio, has to work in China as well, and if it doesn't work, it's the fault of the Chinese. I mean, we are writing the year 2014, and you have this sort of attitude. This is quite amazing, and I think this is also the fault of business schools, that this attitude still exists.
I can give an example of that. I think one of the world's largest food companies went in and actually launched a product in China of the Chinese bao and packaged, and did not do too well. Just not understanding the consumers' consumer preferences for freshness. You talk about it, but some of these companies don't still get it. From our perspective, it's not. We are in Singapore. I think we are best suited to, because our faculty are well trained in Asia and being there, understanding Asian concepts and Asian cultures, etc. And I think it's natural advantage that we have. So it's never going to go away. What we want to do is take our audience and teach them about cultural sensitivity, mindset, global mindset, with one culture in mind. If they want to do one culture, then they can do other cultures. The mindset of being able to do that is most important as such. And we may use our location and locational advantage to that effect, to give that thing. So it's never going to go away. So it's not going to take away the Asians out of our cases, etc., but rather use that to now get that global mindset into our students. So if they even go to Africa, they will know what it means to now become Africanized, or to understand that culture, or the businesses there, the tribes there, etc. So to make them sensitive to that. And that's what I think is most important.
Gentleman over there.
David Jones here from the Plastic Oceans organization. Really questions for everybody, but if I have to Helmut, because I think you're quite a traditionalist, and it's looking at undergraduate business degrees as opposed to the MBA, which I still think has the MBA, which has a lot of mileage in it yet. I started life as a nuclear physicist years ago, but actually I then very recently did an undergraduate degree in business and management just to make sure I was doing it right, and leadership. And I'm currently sort of halfway through a PhD at the business school. But one of the things that I noticed, it was within the business school at a university in UK, it was the largest, probably oversubscribed course within that school, the general business studies course. And if you look at the results from all those people, and it was a few years ago now, and you look at sort of the marketing guys, the economics, and all the other far more specific courses that were offered within those business schools, the job ratio and where people have gone on is quite significantly different between the two. So my question really, and I'm not sure how it works in Asian universities, is has the global markets, the way we do business and everything else changed to an extent that we no longer need jacks of all trades and masters of none, given that, you know, you invariably will not get a job when you finished a basic general business degree looking after every single thing, human resources, marketing, economics, finance. You will move into a specific thing. Should we be concentrating on developing more in that side of life than the general thing? This is just a thought.
Helmut?
I have a quick answer to that. I think that very much depends on the recruiting companies. You find companies like Unilever, which will still prefer generalists, and you find others who want to have specialists. At least I would not have an answer what would be better. That has a lot to do with the heritage of these companies, with the corporate culture. I guess in Japan, if I may answer the question on behalf of you, that's ridiculous, right? The Japanese would prefer generalists, right?
Yes, in most cases. Japanese companies.
In most cases means strong disagreement.
You've been in Japan too much. Go ahead. Gentleman here, please.
Thank you. Greg Story from Dale Carnegie Training. My question is to Nakamura-san. We're talking a lot about internationalization of education today, but I'm wondering about generational aspects of education. With the MOOCs, those massive online systems are going now, the dropout rate is about 90% of completion. edX says that 6 to 9 minutes is the maximum. They've found that people will look at videos. And then I look at my son, he's 13. Schools insist he has a laptop. He has to do research online. And it's just this massive amount of information that he has to sift. When I was at university, you had stacks of books. And if you're really adventurous, you had microfiche. But it was limited. You had a limited scalable thing. But today is no scale. So I'm wondering, rather than the internationalization aspect, are we facing a bigger dilemma in educating young people, be it in business degrees or otherwise, which is going to be more a generational thing around access to too much information, compacting with shorter attention spans? And I'm just wondering what your thinking is around that area.
Thank you. I'm very close to Helmut. The MOOCs, I think, is like a one-way lecture. So it's very difficult even for, let's say, my generation. The question is, how can we make the education fun? You know, so that means it has to be, how to say, interactive. It has to be like jazz in a way. You know, you have a plot, but maybe like our courses at Globus. If students have like better comments, the faculty should have room to explore what will come out from the discussion, what experience he or she will bring to the classroom. So, MOOCs, I think, is good for like a basic learning, but for applied, It has to be, much more interactive, much more closer. So at Globis, the online MBA is not MOOCs. We call it Spoke. That's small, and kind of closed, both-way interaction, even online. And not only we will do a video, but we will do chatting. We will use the whiteboard so that the education will be fun. So I don't think it's necessarily a generation problem. How can you make it interesting or fun? I think that's what we should, work on. So maybe you have
Helmut,
different
you-
view.
As a Westerner
Seem to
here,
be-
I will clearly disagree. Point number one, and here we are in agreement, I think it's much too early. There are lots of new surveys coming out with extraordinary results, such as when you talk about short attention span, we are now looking at 5 minutes or something like that, right? Wow. So I think we are early stages, and there is very clearly a generational gap. I personally think that none of us here in the room should actually talk about this. I have in mind, don't tell my faculty colleagues, at the end of this week I have a meeting with our committee on online or blended learning. And I have invited 3 16-year-old students not from the street, I know, to participate in this meeting, which is otherwise only attended by professors. I think we just don't get it. I mean, we are not spending up to 6 hours a day in front of a screen. But that is our generation. If we want to be relevant in future, we have to take that into account, whether we agree to this or not. If we're parents, we all scared, right, and don't like it, etc. But we have to take that into account. And only to look at the sort of the old generation, well, not enough. But it's really open. So you better bring in the kids.
Yeah, I think it's still very early stage, and I tried one of the Coursera courses because I'm very interested. And I said, well, unless I try it, I'll never know. And I gave up, I quit like 2 courses after like 2 weeks or so, but I finally made it 12-week course. But I spent all my winter vacation working on it because there was a section that I couldn't quite understand. So I just left it and went all the way. But I had to catch up. So I watched every single video all over again and do the quiz and so forth. And about 2 hours before the deadline, I finally managed. So I said, yeah. But it requires a lot of sort of collaboration, much more community support. It's very difficult to do it on your own. And so that's what, at least what I found out. And there are many different courses. So some of them are much easier, much shorter. But 12-week course on logical thinking was like really tough. Go ahead.
I am Martha. I work for Philip Morris International, a couple of years based in Japan, and I'm highly interested, to hear from our wonderful panelists today about, your thoughts in terms of hiring trends. I work in human resources, and for us to better understand what, it takes for companies to go and compete for that talent for those undergraduates, it's very important. So we can adapt ourselves, to those students, to what drives the motivation, to develop, the best and most effective ways to bring them into the workforce. So thank you in advance for sharing your thoughts and insights about it.
The undergraduates today, they want to do good and do well. And if you don't give them that opportunity, they'll leave you. They won't stay with you. I don't care whether you're Philip Morris or anybody. They'll just go. And a much more comfortable situation for them as such, looking for jobs, at least in the Singapore area as such. And to hang on to them, you've got to understand them and how to now keep them the short attention span, give them the right kinds of things to think about their own career as such. So it's not just a job, you have to show them a path. Now, and right from the beginning, you have to do this. Not later on when they're a manager, etc. Right from the beginning, if you have some high potentials, if you think that you're recruiting, and you better show them the path and be attuned to what they like to do and give them the opportunities to meander away from the job, because that is what keeps them attentive to your company and what your company stands for, the values. And so the multinationals are facing this problem. They're treating them like kids at the usual way, and they will do a performance management at the end of the year, etc. The students your talent is actually doing a performance evaluation of you. And so you better be aware of that and be able to get in that conversation. And if your managers are not attentive to this, there'll be turnovers as such. And so this is what we see. This is what our students tell us. They tell our faculty too. We're bored with what you're doing. Can you keep us engaged? And so that also happens in our classrooms itself. So we see that happening. And so that means we need to change as faculty, and you all need to change as recruiters as such of companies. It's not just the GPA anymore. No, it's not just that. It's not just the courses. It's not understanding the person. It's a little more time consuming for the HR managers as such. But I think it's well worth it if you can identify who your high potential talents are.
Okay.
I think there are a number of surveys which are carried out across the world, and I've just recently seen a survey which goes across country, one type of survey, asking for the motivations. That's available. And if we exchange cards, I can send this to you. There are amazing differences, such as in certain countries, predictability and safety is more important than challenges. Or in other countries, more salaries is more important than others. But that's very country specific. There's definitely no global trend to see. My own view is when you look at emerging markets or developing countries, that's where everything is growing. There is more the desire to be part of this and to be challenged and then to move forward. My recollection is when you look at mature markets, it's much more the safety and predictability which comes out, which is not so surprising.
Since we have a few more minutes left, I would like to ask each panelist to respond to the following question. I think we mentioned that in 5 years out or so, we want to see the Asian business schools having more students from all over the world. So that the whole thing is going to be much more globalized. In order for that to happen, if you can ask one person one thing, who would you ask what?
A candidate.
Yeah, or anything. We want to make sure, we want to have this ideal state of Asian business schools attracting more students, half of the students from all over the world. In order for that to happen, who do you ask what? If you can ask one thing to anybody, policymakers, anybody.
One of my dreams is in Singapore. A lot of owner-managed companies, a lot of very wealthy people, they all send their students where? To America, to the hallowed halls of Harvard, or etc. And when they come back, they're usually not well equipped to take over their parents' companies or work in them, etc. So that's my target. Have you been in some culture where it's really now proselytized and you're so steeped in a particular culture? We need to debrief you, unlearn you, and relearn you. And that's the opportunity I see, at least at Nanyang Business School.
I'd like to ask companies to give more opportunities to MBA candidates. Yes, there is opportunity, but still, we hope that MBA will be valued more highly. There'll be more managerial position open for MBAs. If that's the case, I think Asian Business School can climb up the rankings.
Helmut?
I will make a repetition of a remark which I've made in Financial Times and got me in deep trouble. I would look at the participants and ask them, or make the statement, if you want to study the past, you go to Philadelphia. If you want to study the future, you go to Asia.
That's good. So if you're thinking about the future, you know where to go. So with that note, I would like to thank panelists for the exciting discussion. And one thing which I'm sort of curious is that we never talked about the government. Even though we're talking about human capital, which is the base or foundation for the competitiveness of the countries as well as companies. So I was just kind of struck. I mean, I've just noticed that nobody talked anything about the policy.
I can tell you, Singapore is so forward-looking. No, I get a call from the Monetary Authority of Singapore who will tell me, here's the insurance, reinsurance industry, here are all the jobs, here are all the expats, and you put together a program in enterprise risk management which will get me 100 students every year who will take those jobs up. My Singaporeans must have those jobs. This is data analysis, big data, and really focus. And they'll tell me how much money do you need to hire faculty to go through this. Very different view of government I have now since I've come to Singapore. The US government means evil. Here, government can actually be of help to education.
That's a good news. So for the encouragement, thank you very much. And thank you for the questions from the floor. Thank you. This concludes.